Welcome back, everybody. I'm The-Hua. Thank you for visiting the channel. It's been a busy week. Um, yeah, over the weekend, visited the buddies over in Seattle at Vast Recording Studios, which was a whole lot of fun. Um, and then got back Monday, had my own band practice, and we had a meeting in terms of direction for the next year and such. And I'm going to be creating a video content for them as well. And I'll be posting that up here sometime soon. Plus, video content that I did over the weekend, as well as I entered a remix contest put on by Miss Christie, top music attorney, and it was a whole lot of fun, a whole lot of fun, and but listening to a song over and over and over and over again, and trying to get everything kind of right. So I really hope I get it. In kind of the running, because there's some good competition going on. But it was a whole lot of fun doing. I basically took the stems that she presented for people to remix, and then I put a flamenco pop rock kind of twist to it. So anyways, I hope they enjoy it. And today I just got done digging ditches. Turns out our sub pump wasn't working, so water was just kind of coagulating. Then we looked at the gutter system and dug that out, and let's just say, for lack of a better word, I'm pretty exhausted. So I figured, you know what, this is the perfect time. I want to kind of keep this as a routine, just make the video and get it out. So I figured, well, why not just go ahead and kind of showcase YouTube videos I like to watch. So for today, I'm going to be featuring ColdFusion TV. If you haven't gotten the chance to check him out, I highly recommend you guys do. It's the guy produces great content, kind of an inspiration in terms of how he approaches his content. Is very, very insightful, very informative, well put together, and it's actually quite entertaining to watch. So I hope you guys hang out with me and watch this. I think this is kind of the newest thing. I don't know if it's a reaction video. I personally have been waiting to watch this video. Usually when he puts out content, I'm like, I get excited about it because it's like, wow, okay, that's pretty cool, and I didn't know this. So today we're going to be watching his latest video, why Gen Z is so poor. And being someone that has lived in the poor circuit of life, it's kind of interesting. I would like to understand what his perspective is on Generation Z, and why they're feeling the way that they are, as opposed to when I was going through the recession back in 2008. There was a point I was just eating rice, mayonnaise, and ketchup. That's how poor I was. Luckily, I had enough to have a roof over my head, but it was no picnic, and you learn the hard knocks during that time. So I'm just wondering if it's something that's something that some people generally go through, or if it's something that where the hard times that we currently are in right now, if YouTube or social media is kind of an outlet for them to kind of display a little bit more of what they're going through, as opposed to during my time, there wasn't really YouTube or anything. That was life. So now that everything's on the internet, everything gets a little bit more broadcast. So I'm really curious on what his take is. So let's go ahead and start this puppy off. And yeah, if you find anything insightful or questionable, or put it down in the comments. I'd love to hear your guys' opinion on it. So all right, let's get after it.
I have a business marketing degree, but ended up with two retail jobs, one that pays $10 an hour and the other with fewer shifts at $25 an hour. I'm not making enough to get by.
I'm not going to have experiences that most young adults do or did in the past, because everything is just too expensive. There's so much unknown.
I sometimes struggle to afford food, despite working full-time and living with a roommate. Making ends meet means pulling money from savings, skipping a meal, or drinking water so that I can try and stay full.
These individuals are from Generation Z, a generation who are coming of age right now. A common reaction to the previous statements are as follows. Every generation has their own issues to deal with during their time, and this new generation just simply needs to work harder. While some could say that that's partially true, it's clear that the numbers are not in favour of Gen Z.
When I first started living on my own, I was paying $280 a week in rent. My landlord wanted to increase my rent now to $450 a week.
I make over 3 times the federal minimum wage, and I cannot afford to live.
Where does this go in 5 years when 100 million Americans cannot buy a home and get a fixed rate, and their rent's being raised $200 every year?
So, yeah, right off the bat, I kind of mentioned, it's something that we've kind of all gone through. As for the 2 jobs, yes, I've had 2 jobs in the past, and it's a struggle. 350 to 450 though. That's back in 2012, I was paying 500 with a roommate, and then that went up. We had to move because the landlord wasn't paying the bank for the house, so we were forced out. And then we moved over to a actually really nice house, and they bumped up to 700. Which then the owner of that place passed away, and then we had to move to another place, which is, it could have been in better shape, but it got to the point where we were paying about, I think, what was it, 1,200 a month? 1,200 a month, and I had 2 roommates with that. 2 roommates. This was in the Seattle area, so working 2 jobs, and I guess it depends on what kind of job you get. There's also the saying, you could work harder or you could work smarter. Sometimes it's hard to figure out, what working smarter is all about. But I guess it's, just, I would say not just keeping your head on the grindstone, but looking for the opportunities that could give you something. Now, I will say that, granted, it is a lot harder. I'm not going to deny it with house prices the way they are and inflation and stuff like that. Granted, 2008 went through kind of the same kind of deal, but 2008, 2012. But in the same vein of it was, you kind of just took the lumps as they came and tried to find. My idea was find a better paying job. And learn the skills of that trade. So I always don't think that, one job is where you're going to be stuck at. And always learn from the job that you're doing in order so you could take those skills and apply it to the next place you're at. So never be uncomfortable with change, because change is bound to happen. All right.
6 in 10 Gen Zers feel unable to save for the future. Only 15% of Gen Z expect to be able to afford a home in the next 5 years. And 80% of those who rent worry that rental costs will keep rising beyond their capacity to afford them. 47% of Gen Z report that they or a household member lost a job or took a pay cut due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and this makes them the most affected generation. Around 40% of Gen Z are struggling with mental health, with financial stress being a major factor. So how did a generation that was poised for success end up in such financial distress? Are Gen Z really as lazy as many people claim? Or can we really blame this generation? Just think about it. They had to live through multiple economic crises, geopolitical tensions, a global pandemic, and a new, constant fear of AI threatening to replace them.
Okay, so it sounds like you're actually talking about millennials. The only thing that really affected, I think, Gen Z was the COVID, because a lot of them were still inside college, and that was a whole different kind of aspect to it. And AI. So I think as a millennial, we got a recession. No, but hold on, let's back up. We had 9/11, a war, recession, another recession, and then COVID, another recession, depression, and now AI. So, and let's not forget, everyone's hopped up on medications. So I would say, get off the pills, people. I think your life will be a whole lot better once you start. And you'll be like, well, I have to take, this because it helps with this and helps with my anxiety and whatnot. And I just got to tell you, listen, start eating, look up to eat right, look up to eat healthy because it's really the food that's affecting you. And with that, get off the medication because you start taking one, you're going to have a side effect. So you start taking another one, which is going to have another side effect. And you start taking another one. Just phase them out of your life. And you're talking to someone that was addicted to Adderall for a time, so I know what I'm talking about when it comes to the whole pill popping thing. It's not good for your mental capacity and being able to handle real world problems. Just learn how to be yourself. All right.
How do millennials and boomers play a part in all of this? In this special episode, we go through a journey of generations and we look at the real reasons why Gen Z is facing the brunt of it all. We'll tackle this topic in 3 broad categories: housing, the economy, and education. A quick note, although this episode is focused on Gen Z, a lot of this applies to younger millennials too. And a lot of these numbers are America focused, but we'll definitely be including other countries around the world too. So join us as we try to answer perhaps the most important question facing this generation. Is Gen Z truly the poorest generation in modern times?
You are watching ColdFusion TV.
Before we dive in, let's paint a vivid picture of who we're talking about when we say Gen Z. At the time of writing, the oldest of them would be around 27 years of age. In America and Britain, this group is 1/5 of the population, a similar proportion to current baby boomers. The developing world has more of them. In Nigeria, Gen Z makes up 32% of the population and 27% for India. In the West, compared to millennials, Gen Z are more environmentally conscious, drink and smoke less, and are in less relationships. They care more about social issues, although they socialize less, 38 minutes per day, versus an hour for the youth of the year 2000. You can watch my loneliness epidemic video for more on that side of things. Celebrities in this generation include the likes of Billie Eilish, Zendaya, Greta Thunberg, Mbappe, Mr. Beast, and Naomi Osaka. While these Gen Z celebrities are obviously doing fine, everyday people in their cohort are coming of age into tough times.
What is really screwed up is the world is massively in debt. The workforce is shrinking, population growth is slowing down, it's slowing down GDP growth, so there's not enough GDP growth to pay or service the amount of debts out there. And what we found since 2008, that the answer to this debt issue has been printing of more money, debasement of currency. People think of it in terms of, at first they think it's going to be inflation, as in the price of CPI goes up, but it's actually not. It's actually something much worse, is wages don't rise, but assets go up, because optically you're debasing the currency. But what's happening is you can't afford as much of that now. And so your future self is in fact poorer. So a classic example is a 35-year-old now in the United States, getting married, having kids. A house is very expensive now. Compared to when Peter and I were young, it was relatively cheap, 3 times incomes. Now it's like 10 times incomes. So there's no real way of getting up the ladder. So the advantages that your parents had are not available to you.
Yeah, he definitely hit the nail on the head on that one. I would say that ever since the 2000, this is actually an effect of the actual 2008 crisis when basically pensions and everything just got sucked away. That was kind of what I saw was kind of the initial phase of devaluing the dollar, like when it started actually rising up, the actual devalue of it. A lot of people find that printing money, it was the solution, and the bailouts were the solution, when we all said, especially my generation, I think it was like 28, 29. A lot of people were saying they're just kicking the can down the road. Well, guess what, people, it's now down the road. So you're seeing the devalue of the dollar happen. I think in that aspect, it's not just affecting the Gen Z. Me personally, I would love to own my own house. eventually, unfortunately, I rent myself. So, but I do look forward to the fact of owning a house. A lot of people are saying the housing market is gonna crash, and so I keep my ear to the grindstone on that. Uh, but into that regard, people that are coming out of the colleges and stuff like that, and they have this, they see, the current celebrities of the day, which is very, very funny. Like the current celebrities of the day is very, very different, very different. Billie Eilish and the whole and Zendara and all that. There half of the people. I don't even think I've ever seen a Mr. Beast video. Like I know about him and I've heard about him and all his little shenanigans that he's going through currently, but as for the actual celebrity status being the first one was Justin Bieber, and we all know how that's turning out as well. Before that, though, it was we had movie stars and celebrities and stuff like that, and it's very, very different in terms of who has the famous take. The famous limelight these days, because the limelight is actually drastically changed, and it's actually continuing to change with post this election. It's really interesting how legacy media is not kind of the focus on what people see as being famous. The red carpet is something that we once held as high esteem back in the 90s and 2000s. There was a point when I wanted to win a Grammy. Now I'm like, yay, you won a Grammy. I think that entertainment has become so saturated that when people think of celebrities, they think of people that got rich quick, as opposed to there are celebrities out there that actually they went through motions and had actual talent. I mean, I'm talking real talent. I'm not talking about produced talent. There is a difference between, the actor that can do an improvisation like Jim Carrey or so. We'll never see another Jim Carrey or a Robin Williams in the coming generations. And then as for the actual talking to each other and socializing, that's a big aspect in terms of people being able to grow and communicate with each other, is that no one really talks to anybody because we got our social internet, social media, and the means of communication is now texting your feelings instead of speaking and sharing your feelings. So all right, well, I'm gonna stop talking here.
For Gen Z, above all, there's probably one thing that feels more out of reach than anything else: housing. If you've scrolled through any social media feed, you've likely come across memes like these. This humour hits close to home for 34% of Gen Zers who see home ownership as an impossible feat in their lifetime. Not in the next 10 to 20 years, but an entire lifetime. Think about that for a second. Additionally, in 2022, the typical age for a first home buyer hit a record high, 36. Gen Zers are staying at home longer to save on rent. For example, in the US, young adults living at home have increased 87% over the last 2 decades. And in Australia, it's risen 17% just since 2016. In Sydney, only 0.1% of the properties there are affordable for the average household. For one student in Canada, he found it cheaper to just fly to his classes to avoid higher rent.
I need to pay like $2,500 for the rent. I don't feel that is viable.
The problem really becomes clear when you see the disparity visually. In the US, home prices are now rising twice as fast as income. Now it takes about 6 years of income to buy the average house. For boomers, this was 2 to 3 years. Generation X, 3 to 4 years. Millennials, 4 to 5 years. And, as just shown, Gen Z, 6 to 7 years. But Australia is on another level. The average house price in Sydney, $1.6 million. If you're on a single wage, it takes 14 years of income on average to buy a house. Remember, that's 14 years of work if you save 100% of everything you earn. In other words, you'd have to be homeless and eating out of garbage bins to do that. Just astonishing.
So how much did it cost to fill your tank?
Almost $100.
How much is the car payment?
$140.
And what about insurance?
$180.
No, thank you. State Farm.
$197 for car insurance. I got a friend who told me about this website. Now I'm spending $58
a month.
Full coverage.
That's saving $139. It's amazing. All you do, you just go to the site.
And then there's stories like this.
This 3-bedroom Paddington home in need of renovation, selling at auction for an eye-watering $9 million. That's a whole $1.5 million above the reserve, boasting off-street parking and a converted stable. The terrace last sold in 1981 for $300,000. The new buyers are planning to spend anywhere from $1 million to $5 million to bring it up to scratch.
And this.
This split-level 1-bedroom apartment in Bondi Junction, which is listed for $900. To say I was underwhelmed is an understatement. Among the applicants were 2 young mates, both male and wished to stay anonymous. They were prepared to co-live in this one-bedder. These are the kind of sacrifices people are having to make.
So, one piece of advice I'd like to share to especially the Gen Zers. I know the city sounds like a fun and fantastic experience. It's not. The prices that you can find living out, yes, you may be out in the sticks. And people are a little bit different. Actually, people can be a little bit more friendly, to be honest with you, than in the city. But what I can tell you is if you want to save your money, working in tech hubs, Amazon or Microsoft or all those places, going where the economic boom you think is, just find a nice, quiet place on the countryside and just continue on from there. It's trust me, you'll find that try to find a job out where it's affordable. Don't go live in Sydney or Seattle or LA or Las Vegas or on the in those major metropolitan areas, because guess what, it's in the end, you'll find that it costs you more just to be of the city than being able to save and raise a family, have a great home, if you didn't live in the city. So the city life is called the concrete jungle for a reason, people. Only few really can make it, and the few that do, well, they would I say that they're better off? Probably not. Hence why there's a loneliness epidemic. So, just food for thought on that one.
There's a myriad of reasons of why this is happening in Australia, and I'm going to do an entirely separate video on this topic alone. But the bottom line is prices have surged more than 22% in just 1 year. In the UK, things are bad too. The average house costs 9 times as much as average earnings. In the UK, the last time house prices were this high compared to earnings was almost 150 years ago, back in 1876. But this is where things get a little more complicated. There's actually a twist here with Generation Z. Despite a global shortage in affordable housing and rising property prices, Gen Z seems to be navigating the housing market adequately. Data from Redfin over in the US shows that 30% of 25-year-olds owned homes in 2022, 3% more than their Gen X counterparts at the same age. Well, how is this? Here's what different experts say. Those in Gen Z took advantage of record low mortgage rates in 2020 and 2021. This made servicing a mortgage less of a burden. Gen Z has more remote work opportunities, so they're able to live somewhere remote and more affordable. And lastly, this cohort has more access to technology, information, and platforms, which all help in their home purchases. According to Ben Miller, the CEO of Fundrise, quote, "Every generation is getting more economically screwed in some ways, but they, Gen Z, have way more knowledge and information than previous generations. Way, way, way more."
That is actually pretty true. Like with YouTube and the internet, there is no excuse for not being able to learn how to get ahead. Uh, yeah, there's just no excuse for it. Heck, I was using YouTube to change out the electrical system in my own car at one point. Like it's really impeccable on how knowledge these days have the transferability of knowledge is just astounding. So anyway.
That's got to count for something, end quote. Interestingly, in comparison, millennials aren't doing so great with housing. It seems like the 2008 crisis hit that cohort hard when it came to buying a house. On a societal level, the problem of home ownership is making it harder for both younger millennials and Gen Z to think about marriage and having kids. A solution that's equally as sad as it is dystopian is the tiny home trend.
Gen Zers and millennials are buying prefabricated tiny homes on Amazon for under $40,000, as the median price of American homes tops $400,000. Here in California, the median house is over $770,000.
A silver lining here is that reports suggest that the job market is booming. Or is it? If you're 15 to 24 years old, in some places you'd be lucky to have a job. In Spain, the unemployment rate of this age bracket is 28%, Sri Lanka 27%, Greece 25%, Italy and Sweden 23%. In China, things also aren't going great for the young. Thanks to economic uncertainty and a large population in higher education, over 1/3 of degree holders there may be unemployed. Let's go back to other parts of the world in the West. The picture looks a lot better, but as you'll soon see, not all is as it seems. Youth unemployment across the richer countries of the world on average is around 13%. It hasn't been this low since 1991. But you might be thinking, something doesn't feel right about this rosy picture. It's not like you hear Gen Z and millennials rejoicing about how good the job market is. So what is going on? Why don't the figures line up with what everyone's feeling? Well, the fact is, the figures we often hear aren't telling us the full story. For example, in 1994 in the US, the government changed the way they count unemployment. They stopped counting all of those who stopped looking for work or only have part-time employment. A lot of other countries have done.
Yeah, that's actually very, very accurate. Sorry, I've got two screens and I'm trying to get so I can mute the mic and hit play and stuff. I'm pretty tired right now, but yeah, they really kind of hit the nail on that, because unemployment numbers, I mean, homeless people don't really report unemployment, be part of unemployment. They just gave up on the system. And you get to see it, oh, unemployment numbers are down. It's like, go look at the streets, man. It's quite different. So yeah, and it's always been a jerry rig of numbers ever since, I would say. Unemployment, the GDP, even some stocks, I would say their numbers are pretty well, they paint the rosy picture. I actually learned that working at Microsoft for a time, because I would collect data sheets and stuff, and my job wasn't to give them the results. My job was to give them the results they wanted. Major difference on that. So, anyways.
This too, and when you factor that in, everything starts to make sense. Peter Schiff explains further.
So if you really want to put today's unemployment in context, what you have to compare is the current U6 number to the U3 number that existed prior to 1994. And I happened to do that, and what I found, if you look at the 1950s and 1960s, There wasn't a single year during those 2 decades where unemployment was as high as it is right now. You got to go to the 1970s. That was 1975. Oh, and 1976. So only 2 years. And that's supposed to be a horrible decade, stagflation, Jimmy Carter, all the bad stuff that happened. There were only 3 years during the 1980s when unemployment was higher than it is right now. We were in the worst recession since the Great Depression. The Fed had interest rates up at 20%, right? We were really trying to fight inflation. So only during the latter 1970s and early 1980s did you have unemployment higher than it is right now.
So, how is Gen Z doing?
And then let's not forget, they took us off the gold standard in 78. It also plays a big role.
Today overall. Opinions are divided. On the one hand, Lawrence Kotlikov, an economics professor at Boston University, agrees that, quote, "This is a tougher climate for sure. Parents need to realize that their kids are in trouble," end quote. Others like personal finance expert Ken Coleman believe that Gen Z has an advantage due to technology, which levels the playing field. Quote, "I think this next generation, this Gen Z generation, and the kids coming up behind them, I think we're going to see an entrepreneurial boom like we've never seen in history because of the playing field being leveled by technology, making it so much easier," end quote. While it's true that technology does indeed help even the playing field, will it be enough? And it could be a double-edged sword. For example, AI advancements, however hyped and overblown today, in some areas could provide a real challenge to working humans over the next decade.
We'll have to wait and see. Okay, so that was the job market. But once Gen Zers get a job, how are they doing? Well, again, there's some interesting stuff going on. Gen Z have figured out something pretty smart. Changing jobs more often allows them to earn more, almost 30% more according to Business Insider.
According to The Economist, the wages for Gen Z are rising much faster than other age groups. In America, hourly pay rates for those 16 to 24 were 7% higher year on year compared with workers aged 25 to 54 at 13%. In Britain, the pay of those aged 18 to 21 rose 15% last year, and this is far greater than the other age groups. In New Zealand, the average hourly pay of those aged 20 to 24 increased by 10% compared to the average of 6%. In a few places, including Croatia and Slovenia, Gen Zers are already earning as much as the average worker. It's all very interesting. The explanation for this could be simple. After the post-COVID inflation started exploding, a lot of people would ask for a raise, and they got it. But the difference with Gen Z is this. They're the youngest cohort, so they had the lowest base wage. Because their wage was lower, companies could afford to pay them more, as it was still cheaper than retraining someone else, for example. So, when you look at the proportions, Gen Z seems to be doing better. But the truth is, even if their pay is increasing at a faster rate, it may still not be enough gross income to live comfortably. So the question must be asked, why is pursuing higher salaries not translating into financial security? One word: inflation.
That's a definitely interesting take on that. It's in commercial right now, so I'm gonna let that play out. But yeah, so it's really interesting. It kind of sounds like the boomers and the millennials just got shafted, and they're just giving all the money to the Gen X and the millennials got shafted, and they're giving all the money to the Gen Z. Yeah, that's not the case. Because inflation, I knew was going to kick in. I mean, heck, once they started sending out those $2,000 stimulus checks, I knew. It's like, well, crap. I mean, where does that money come from? That money ain't going to grow on trees. So the moment they started sending out those stimulus checks, and I was also I was one of those non-essential workers as well. So I was forced to go into unemployment during the COVID thing and such, which also we got shafted because I think in the state of Washington, they got scammed out of like $1.8 million from a scam artist in Nigeria or something like that. But yeah, once that all kicked in, the moment I was put back on the job, I said, "Hey, I need a raise." I need a raise. My rent's gonna be going up. This is before the inflation, but I knew inflation was gonna. It was a slow roll ball about to happen. Yeah, I asked them for a raise. They said, well, we can give you more overtime. Yeah. I didn't stick with that job too long after that. I saw where loyalty, and that's the other thing, loyalty in companies, and I found out where those kind of things lie. So, that being said,
Inflation. While most of us have felt the pinch of everyday essentials, inflation lies at the heart of Gen Z's financial struggles. They're mostly just starting their careers and probably earning less overall. To enter the workforce during a period of rapid inflation, not seen since the 1970s, would be a real shock for any young adult. In 2022, inflation soared to the highest point in 40 years. During the pandemic, supply chain disruption meant that goods cost more. And to prevent the economy from stalling, governments printed excess amounts of money to revitalize it. It sort of worked, but all of that extra money sloshing around in the economy later showed up as inflation. Suddenly, a trip to the local grocery store was 8% more expensive. And this isn't to mention fuel, airfares, rent, and transportation, and most critical of all, education. But we'll come back to that. Gen Z has never seen prices rise so rapidly in their lifetime, and they're going through a sense of sticker shock. Some reports even go as far as to say that Gen Z is, quote, psychologically scarred by the effects of inflation. Okay, so inflation is high, but what does that really mean? Well, I quickly need to show you some lessons from history so we can understand the full effects. Barring World War II, in which life wasn't normal, the mid-70s till 1981 saw raging inflation, reaching a peak of 20%. With everything costing so much and wages being stagnant, most households decided that two people needed to work to keep the household afloat. There was no other choice. The natural result was that more women entered the workforce, a trend that remains till this day. But there's a tragic thing about inflation. Even as the inflation rate subsides, prices usually stay elevated. For example, say the inflation figure drops from 8% to 3%. It doesn't mean that prices actually go down, it just means that prices are rising at a slower rate. In other words, they were rising at 8% and now they're rising at 3%. I say this just to highlight that inflation.
Yeah, that's the funny thing about it. Whenever they're like, oh, we got inflation down to 3% or 4%, it's like, yeah, but it's still rising. You haven't really fixed the issue now, have you? I remember when gas was $1, so there's that as well.
Is nothing to play with. But the good news is that for now, inflation rates across the world have slowed.
While that's welcome news, Gen Z would have to accept that higher prices are here to stay.
Higher wages do help, but the truth is, for a young person just starting out in their professional career,
inflation makes things very hard.
How much did you pay for your first house?
$18,000 with 17 acres.
What year?
1989. When I was a kid, cars were thousands of dollars. A brand new car, like, I don't know, $5,000. I remember seeing ads. Houses were probably, what, 10, 20,000 when I was a kid. A dollar used to actually be worth something.
But there's another twist here. If you can believe it, inflation may be worse than what we're being told. There's a reason why a dollar doesn't go as far anymore.
According to economist John Williams, founder of Shadow Government Statistics, the US government may be fudging the inflation numbers, so real inflation is worse than what's published. Williams argues that the methods used to calculate the inflation have changed over time. This first occurred in the 1980s, and ever since, the inflation rates have been reported as lower than what they actually are. In blue, you'll find a more honest representation of inflation, whereas in red, these are the official statistics. The official statistics don't factor in house price growth directly, or they might substitute steak for more affordable meat when determining grocery expenses, and more tactics of that nature. Although, it's not just the US government that manipulates inflation numbers. It's a common tactic used by many governments around the world, mainly to get re-elected. So why say all of this? The bottom line is that living standards are being slashed by even more than we realize. It's getting harder for everyone, especially those who are just starting out in their professional career.
So, the part you've all been waiting for. Are Gen Z lazy, entitled brats? Let's take a look. To set the stage, when it comes to attitudes among workers, employee confidence and morale is generally low across all generations, not just Gen Z. But that being said, out of all the age groups, Gen Z is the most disengaged at work. Only 44% of Gen Zers report job satisfaction, and that's compared to 67% of older workers. Last year, Gen Zers boasted about quiet quitting. This is where they put in just enough work to not get fired. Others talk about bare minimum Monday. This same type of behavior is occurring all across Asia. In China,
what was it? South Park did an episode about that with Cartman. Like, bare minimum Mondays and off work Tuesdays and work from home Wednesdays and just over and over again. But yeah, no, it's kind of true in that regard. You know, the whole quiet quitting. Do I think that Gen Z or later? I know he's gonna delve more into this, but you know, there is a different aspect as opposed to back in. Heck, I mean, my first job I got was, I would say, 98, 99. Actually, I would say the my first job I worked for my folks, so what can I say? But my first job was Domino's. And yeah, you had a different camaraderie, you know, and a loyalty. I thought that was, during that time, that was the best place to get pizza. Of course, I mean, at my town there was that place, Papa Murphy's, and Pizza Hut. So that was about it. But I always found that Domino's, the food back then, it was less greasy than Pizza Hut, so I always preferred Domino's. But after that, you would see loyalty, company loyalty, and the idea that you do good for the company would do good for you. Yeah, 2008, that kind of went all out of the window. A lot of things happened in 2008 that a lot of younger millennials and Gen Zers, they don't understand the aspects of what happened. Like, we literally saw the breakdown of companies that the CEOs literally stole from the people and got away with it. It was quite pathetic, to be honest with you. And I'm not talking, you know, little mom and pop shops. I'm talking multi-billion-dollar companies that the mom and pop shops would have invested in to keep them afloat. And next thing you know, all I saw was shuttered doors. There was definitely a different take after the whole job loyalty after 2008. It was definitely a different atmosphere, where, yeah, the bare minimum it didn't really become realized until, I would say, about maybe 2015, 2016, where just doing the bare minimum just so you don't get fired was becoming the true staple. It just wasn't being talked about yet. And now we're seeing it kind of full-fledged. And the cool thing about Gen Z is they're realizing at the same time a lot of us have been realizing it too. They've gotten the chance to realize it a lot earlier in life. So I guess that's the major difference. So would I call them lazy because of that? No, not really.
They call it tang ping, or lying flat, and we've covered that on this channel before. A 2022 survey found that Americans aged between 15 and 24 spent 25% less time on, quote, working and work-related activities than those in 2007. This next statistic is very telling. The share of American 12th graders, aged 17 or 18, who see work as a central part of life has dropped sharply. Why is this? Well, Gen Z wants a workplace that has mentorship, genuine connections, flexibility, and a work-life balance. For them, the world has changed, and the traditional office job with a commute just doesn't cut it anymore. The older generations look at Gen Z's attitude with scorn. To them, it appears like a pure lack of work ethic. In fact, 3 in 4 managers consider Gen Z the most difficult age group in the workplace.
Are Gen Z workers lazy, or are they simply changing the work culture?
Lazy. A new survey has found 60% of US bosses have fired their Gen Z workers, complaining that the younger generation wanted to leave early, start late, and expected to be paid a fortune. Well, now bosses in Australia have the same problem.
They're not bad, they're different. That's all. Like, they're growing up in a world where they're probably not going to buy a house, ever going to be able to afford it. They've gone through COVID. I think they've just got a bigger sense of YOLO than we did. And that's not a bad thing. It's just different. So I think older bosses are like, no, I worked a horrible job all my life. You should too. And the kids are saying, no.
But I think the work ethic comes back to finding a passion, and that's no different for any other Gen Z worker. And I think that's why, some of this trend may have happened. Maybe this work wasn't their passion and it's not something that they really wanted to do for the rest of their life. And I think that's where it comes back to. If someone finds a job they love, they'll put in their all. And if it's something that they don't really love, I think my generation nowadays are just more inclined to be like, look, this isn't for me. I'm not going to give my all, and I'll find something else that is.
We have to take better care of young people's mental health, and also the older people in the workforce need to communicate maybe in newer ways and or teach younger people how to communicate in older ways.
Okay, but here's the truth of the whole thing. Most of these companies would lay you off in a heartbeat if it affected their bottom line, and Gen Z knows that. They might even be the first generation to enter the workforce knowing that. I'm not telling you to be lazy on someone else's dime, but a lot of these companies don't give a damn about you, and it's perfectly acceptable to not give a damn back.
But who?
Okay, yeah, one thing about that. You gotta. Sometimes life is a bowl of cherries. Sometimes it's the pits. Let's say you're a barista or a server or something like that. You're just doing that just to pay the bills or whatnot. There is still a manner of respect that needs to be displayed. You're a representation of the business that you work for. The company in itself is paying you to be a good representation for them. It's a tit for tat. Now, if you can't do that, then just don't work for them in the first place. But if you're in the need of getting a job, yeah, a job is hard. A job isn't supposed to be vacation. All right. If you don't like your boss, tough luck. If your boss has a difficulty of talking to you because of your mental constraints, that's not his fault. All right. He is trying to make the business. He is a working cog in the machine. Yes, I hate to say it. You are a working cog in the machine. All right. That's what you were born to do. That's what everyone is a working cog in the machine. Now, depending on what the machine is, really depends on what kind of cog you're going to be. All right. If you're going to be an effective cog, being able to repair a vehicle, you're not going to want to have your customer come back to you and be like, hey, there's something rattling underneath, and you find a wrench inside the dang vehicle. Okay. Because your employee didn't do his job right. All right. So, and he didn't do his job right because his mental capacity, he was very stressful about something he read on his phone. So you need to be nicer to him. It's like, nah, man, that's one thing I will say that Gen Zers really need to do is stop using your, like what the lady said, they're a different mentality. They've suffered more for some reason or whatnot. No. You got to get a bigger backbone, buddy. Grow a bigger backbone and just suck it up. The whole put on the bootstraps kind of deal. It's true. You know what it's called? It's called character. All right. If you're able to take the tough shots, that builds character. All right. Don't misconstrue that with, well, he just had to take an off day because of something he read in the newspaper. I can understand if like a family member, something happened to his family member and he needed to take time off to be with them. There is a big difference in that. When the boss says no, you have to come in, and it's like, yo, my mom is in the hospital. Yeah, you go. Family is important. Family is definitely important. You do your business. It goes, family. It goes your health, family. Oh, sorry. It goes God, you, family, and then job. All right. But when I say you, I'm talking about your health and physical health. Your yes, you could say your mental health in that aspect, but you got to be able to handle the world. The world don't give a crap about you. All right. Some Yahoo's gonna walk in and give you a hard time because he had it rough, and he's gonna just take it out on you for no reason. Guess what? That happens. All right. Just go on to the next day. Don't fret on it, and the whole mentality of the youth and what they've gone through and what they're going through. Give me a break. All right. We all go through this stuff too. So, what was their saying? The famous saying during COVID: "We're all in this together." All right.
Who's actually right? Well, we have to look at both sides of the argument first. According to surveys of managers and employers, Gen Z has a combination of perceived entitlement, short attention spans, and a tendency to critique beliefs held by other generations. And this next one's going to be controversial, but there's a common trope that Gen Z is too soft. According to CNBC, 25% of Gen Z say that they need a therapist just to deal with the stress of filing taxes. So who do you think is right? Who has the valid points? I do think it's interesting to see how age plays a role in one's thinking. But one thing is true. Gen Z actually works harder than most people think. Almost 4 in 10 Gen Zers have a side hustle in addition to their regular job. So it seems that Gen Z will do the work, but it's just on their own terms. And now we can move on to education. Let's start with South Korea. The youth of South Korea are the most educated in the world. Nearly 70% of those aged 25 to 34 have a tertiary degree. That's the highest among OEIC countries. Just imagine the stress and fierce competition. Despite their educational prowess, over half of Seoul's youth face asset poverty. That means they lack enough liquid assets to cover their basic needs for 3 months. Moreover, in a country where working 18-hour days isn't uncommon, skyrocketing house costs are pushing many South Korean Gen Zers into small apartments just 50 square feet. That's almost 1/10 of a standard studio apartment. So the United States, of course, is an interesting case. Education there is extremely expensive. Tuition costs have risen faster than the costs of medical services, childcare, and housing. Student debt is no joke with these higher interest rates. It's so bad that 39% of recent graduates said that they would choose to spend a week in jail if that meant that they could erase their debt. So since about 2018, some Gen Zers are simply turning their backs on traditional higher education paths and looking towards a career in trades. Community colleges are also being looked at more.
It is so weird to me that everyone wants to go to a highly ranked college. Usually the professors there, their number one focus is not teaching. They're incredibly smart, but what they really care about is their own research. As you guys know, smarts does not equate to skill when it comes to teaching. It also does not necessarily translate to motivating young people. That's why the most impactful teachers are usually at community colleges. Way cheaper, way easier to get into. You can likely live at home if you go to community college. Overall, I think that's pretty much the move.
But in most Western countries, those who are going to university are being smarter about it. The economy isn't as secure as it once was, so there's been a drift to more easily employable degrees. Science, engineering, and medical degrees are rising, and the humanities are falling out of favour. And all of this isn't to mention Gen Z's debt levels. In the US, for example, with inflation and interest rates rising, Gen Z has the fastest rising debt levels of any generation. Between 2022 and 2023, so just in 1 year, boomers' debt went down by 1.3%, millennials up by 8%, and Gen Z up by 15.4%.
In addition, Gen Z is also making $7,000 less than their same age group was a decade ago, adjusted for inflation. They really haven't got it easy. We can all agree on that. So in conclusion, I personally think that Gen Z is in a very interesting situation. There's multiple stories going on here. On the one hand, there's financial headwinds, inflation, and rising rents. But on the other hand, their wages are rising faster than any other age group, and home ownership rates are higher than millennials during the same age. But at the same time, when compared to Generation X and Boomers, they're still a lot poorer. And I haven't even touched on those from Gen Z, now living in war-torn countries that were peaceful 10 years ago. But in terms of work, their attitudes towards work are changing. Perhaps in 10 years, instead of going to college, learning a trade will be close to the norm. Who knows? But all of that is the reason why this topic is so important. Gen Z are the near future. Historically, in times of economic downturns, the young become disenfranchised, and they vote against the leadership that put them in their current position. Governments and politicians have to pay attention to them, or they'll be out of a job in no time. Considering that Gen Z is the most politically active age group, the potential outcomes may carry even more weight. Given all we've looked at, Gen Z is treading water right now, but they definitely aren't swimming. But let's think outside the box a little bit here, and let's put this all into perspective. Over the past 100 odd years, which generation do you think had it the worst? Well, here's a clue. They're so old, you probably haven't heard of them. They're called the Lost Generation. They were born between 1883 to 1900, 3 whole generations before the baby boomers. Many had to go to the First World War. Their soldiers came back traumatized. The world hadn't seen such violence before. They were left to wander the streets, no support, and lost through life. And this is where the generation got their name from, the Lost Generation. Not long after the scars of war, they would then lose all of their money in the Great Depression. But life wasn't done dealing with them yet. During the depths of poverty, they watched helplessly as they had to send their own kids off to the Second World War. And by the time they got to relax in life, they were already in their 50s. This added perspective isn't to say that Gen Z has it easy. They don't, and there's no arguing against that. And my heart does go out to all of those who are suffering financially. But the world isn't in shambles yet, and there's still opportunities. Hopefully, with better policies and innovation, our economies and employment situations can turn around. On the bright side, Gen Z does have something priceless on their side: time. Wise investments with the little money that they do have could be life-changing in the long run. Their willingness to work side hustles and their access to the best technological tools the world has ever seen could see them becoming the most entrepreneurial generation yet. Society as a whole should support them however they can to help them reach their full potential. After all, they are the future. But that's just my opinion. Given all of the information that was presented in this video, what do you guys think? And with that, we've covered as many aspects on the lives of Generation Z as we possibly could. I hope you did enjoy that coverage and learned something from it. Feel free to share this episode with anyone who'd be interested. If you want to see more on society and why exactly everyone is so lonely these days, check out my episode on the loneliness epidemic. Or if you want to know why the economy is the way it is today, you can check out the episode on the 2008 crisis and why it still affects all of us. Anyway, that's about it from me. My name is The-Hua, and you've been watching ColdFusion, and I'll catch you again soon for the next episode. Cheers, guys. Have a good one.
ColdFusion. It's new thinking.
All right, guys. Well, that's ColdFusion TV. Yeah, really cool stuff. Really cool stuff. So yeah, what do you think? Why is Gen Z so poor? Do you guys think Gen Z is poor? Based off of that video, do you think they're struggling? One take that I kind of get from it is, well, if that's the case, yeah, Gen X and millennials, we're screwed, fellas. We're screwed, ladies and gentlemen. You know, anybody that's 30s and up, we're done. We had our time. We got to move out of the way for Gen Z to collect all the money and become entrepreneurs and get us out of this whole thing. No, I'm just joking. Like I said, we're all in this together, right? But yeah, my takeaway on it is, you know, each generation has their own pitfalls, and each generation has their own hype. I really like the fact that he did touch on like the lost generation and what they went through. I mean, keep in mind, people, like, despite how we may view things, especially in the Western nations, we kind of do live a comfy life. Like the things that they worried about back then are completely different than what we are going through today. Um, but yeah, the whole Gen Z is poor. Yes, I mean, I've met some really intelligent Gen Zer, and I've met some, quite frankly, just like, how did you survive this long? Uh, uh, and then there's also the topic of, yeah, education. Now, me personally, I do feel like the school system has been failing for quite some time. Um, and I think it's just about, what their direction and teaching has been for the last decade, what their focus has been. I would agree. A lot of people say that, I would rather take a class on learning how to do their taxes. I mean, if you think about it, if Gen Z Generation Z is seeking therapeutic help to be able to do, um, basically the tasks of what being an adult is all about, um, then it's obvious that the education system that is designed and built to bring in our next generations to be full functioning adults have failed. I mean, case in point, you just mentioned, yeah, they have to get a therapist to do their taxes. Heck, I've been doing my own taxes, gosh. Well, I would say like the past 4 years, I do go to like H&R Block or whatnot because I just got tired of doing them. So like, you do them, I'll pay you, to take care of for me. But yeah, I would do my own taxes and stuff like that. I would look up tax code. It's called research and understanding. Now, the cool thing is that with YouTube and all this internet technology, forums and discords and stuff like that, there are means and ways to be able to understand the tasks set forth that you'd have to do. Buying insurance, yeah, you don't want to buy insurance. I don't want to. I personally think some insurance is a scam, but you need insurance. All right. You need to protect yourself. And you have to get an understanding of what insurance is and not ask a therapist why do I have to pay this amount of money because it's just taking from me and stuff like that. It's just, you have to do it. That's part of being an adult. Um, what else? What else? Yeah, the whole idea of, like I said before, it's not that they are it's not that Gen Z can't do it. It's just they're soft. Um, stick them in military wars. I guarantee you, those the Gen Zers that are living in wartime areas, they getting backbone. They are uh becoming tough in life, and they'll understand. They'll have a better understanding of living, um and being successful because of the strifes that they're going through. See, you have to understand is, throughout life, you are tested in the waters. You are put through the ringer sometimes, and how you come out of it in the process of doing that builds your character, gives you wisdom, and gives you experience, gives you understanding, and it just emboldens you. It emboldens you to, if you take it the right way, it emboldens you to become something greater than you were before. So yeah, do I think Gen Z is so poor? I think they are more fortuitous than I would say that I was at their age. Internet was still starting out. People only used it to put up, cat videos and stuff like that. It wasn't as such a, I mean, it was a resource, but you still, like, I remember doing essays and you couldn't use the internet. You couldn't use Wikipedia for your research paper. You had to go to the library and list your sources out of textbooks and stuff. I'm sure it's kind of like that these days, but yeah, I haven't been in school for a minute, nor do I want to be in school because yeah, college is a scam, folks. I hate to say it. He's right about community college. Like you actually learn a lot more. Uh, I remember going to community college even then, and that's when I wanted to learn audio engineering. Um, that's when I knew it was like, wow, this is such cool material. Then I go to college and they're like, hey, you got to take some humanities, okay? You got to learn how to do like, well, we have this thing. You could learn how to do fashion. I'm like, no, I want to learn. I want to learn engineering, people. Uh, so yeah, and even then they don't teach you how to do your taxes. Go figure. Nor do they really teach you about money. I think that's the one fallacy that I think a lot of people have ran into is people don't understand money, which is kind of henceforth why it's being devalued. And if you know, you know why the money and who controls the money, who really controls the money, on why the money isn't as valuable as it used to be. So, anyways, yeah, that was ColdFusion TV. Go ahead and yeah, I want to hear what your guys' thoughts are, your comments and stuff. If you'd like to see me do another video of this, or I would actually recommend going to his channel and just watching videos for yourself, because I mean you could see right up here on the screen. I mean, yeah, loneliness epidemic, which is very interesting, and the death of the real economy. Oh yeah, that actually tugged at the strings a little bit because you lived through that, and you basically, it was kind of like the start of the end of the American dream per se. Um, yeah, it definitely led me to a lot tougher times than I anticipated. I got to witness a lot of the downfall of the music industry and the things that I was taught, in terms of how music business was right out the window after college. I did take a music marketing class, one of the coolest classes and the coolest teachers. I hope to introduce you guys to him sometime. But yeah, he was definitely an inspiration, and he kind of taught me how to do music marketing. But yeah, after 2008, everything changed, So but yeah, that concludes the video. And sorry again for the little mishaps and stuff like that. I'm gonna do some editing, but not a whole lot. I'm kind of exhausted. I'm just like, just want to get this video out here. But yeah, go ahead, like, comment, share, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. And if you like, the stuff that I'm doing, go ahead and visit my buy me a coffee thing and buy me. Actually, I could use a coffee right now. What time is it? It's it's 5 o'clock. Okay, I can't have coffee. Can't have coffee, or else I'll be up until 1 or 2. So, anyways, I'm The-Hua. Thank you guys for joining and tuning in, and we'll go ahead and see you next time. Peace.